Looks like we are on now. Hello everybody out there, my name is Saxon and welcome to another camera class. Today's camera class is going to be camera basics. Let me pull it up for all my people here. Let me just make sure my sound is working okay before I do that. Yep, sound is going. Awesome. Alright, I'm sorry for being a couple minutes late here, but welcome to Camera Basics. Today we're really kind of going in. This is the first class of the month before we get into the rest of them. Camera Basics is meant to be just that. We really start with just the beginning to moving from your phone or from an older camera into something that's a little more updated nowadays. So we're going to start by learning the way to transfer images. I like to always start with that because that's a point of contention I notice a lot of people come from, especially when you're used to shooting on the cell phone or some of the earlier cameras. So we'll start with that. Then we'll move into the body of a camera, the button layouts, what to expect when clicking through, what certain symbols and shapes mean, and then lastly we're going to move into the basics of taking great photos and just kind of tips and tricks that I have for that for you. Next week we get into more of the intermediate side, which is learning more of those manual controls on the camera. So without further ado, let's get started. So first and foremost, I like to talk about where to go when all else fails. I'm a great resource. I can answer questions basically on every brand that you have. If I can't figure it out, my handy dandy friend Google can. However though, if you are at home or you're not in the state or you don't feel comfortable asking for help, I always say start with the owner's manual. Most cameras, if not all of them, are going to have some form of manual that comes either in the box or is online. They're usually 200 pages thick, and they'll go through a bunch of different things that you might have questions on. So always start there. Moving from there, imaging resource is another one that I really like. One of my camera representatives or vendors put me onto that one. It's a great online forum community where if you have a question or a problem with a model of camera that you have or something you're interested in, there are tons of people on there that can help answer it for you, and they do a really great job. They also have a podcast, and that's what that little shape underneath is. Very nerdy on the camera stuff. They go into details and specs that you probably don't need. But however, if you want to just kind of listen to camera knowledge and information from experts, that's a good one too. Canon, Nikon, and Sony all have amazing websites that you can go to. The two people in front of me, you guys are both Sony users, so they have the website B Alpha, if I'm not mistaken. That's their nickname is the Alpha series for their cameras. With that, they have really great resources and great material on just the models of camera that you have. So if you specifically want
What's the website?
It should be the B Alpha website.
B-L?
B Alpha. Like, yeah, A-L-F, or A-L-P-H-A. Alpha. So yeah, B Alpha. Nikon's fantastic too. They're one of my favorite websites of all the camera brands. They really break it down in a beautiful way. Canon's fantastic as well in their own ways, but they all have great information on just their camera brand. So to be more site specific, that's definitely where I would recommend. And my all-time favorite, I recommend it hands down out of anything else, is YouTube. Always will be YouTube. If you type in the camera that you purchase or that you're thinking about purchasing, odds are there's about 100 different videos online on just the camera body that you own. And these people will go through for an hour and just talk about features, tricks, tips, things they recommend for your specific model that will help you understand it better. My class is meant to be a nice general overization or overview of everything that you're going to learn or need to see, and so that's what we're here to show today. So the first thing I start with is where do your pictures go? Make sure you have two of them. I don't push camera accessories that hard onto newbies, especially if you're just getting into it. Buying a camera is kind of like being addicted to something. I don't know what, you might, just in general. When you buy something for a camera, all of a sudden you think that you need the next thing and this and that. And it's a really fun hobby, but it can be very expensive. There's two things for a camera I think everybody should have at least two of, and that's memory cards, 2 memory cards, and 2 batteries. You want to have 2 memory cards because on the back of your memory card, those are copper contact strips. Over time, that copper will wear out and get faded, and when you go to insert the memory card back into the camera after downloading your images, there's a time or a chance that the camera or the card just won't read anymore. Nothing's more embarrassing than going to a shoot and realizing that your memory card isn't available to you because it's busted, and now you have to go all the way back after you drove to a destination or you went on vacation, and now you can't use that fancy camera. I'm guilty of it. I had a photo shoot one time for a client, and I went out there, brought all my camera gear, got to the thing, had one memory card in the camera, and it was not reading properly. So I had to tell them that we had to reschedule, and they weren't happy. So make sure you have 2 of them. When you're looking at memory cards, they're going to tell you how many gigabytes are available to you. My recommendation, just given how powerful cameras are nowadays, is to go for at least 64 gigabytes. If you're concerned about video, then I would try to invest in a high-speed card. Typically, a high-speed card will have some sort of number on there where it'll say something like, say, 70 megabytes or 7 megabytes. There's one that said it right there. Really what that's going to be is the speed at which it's downloading your photo and your video. So 70 megabytes, that 70 to 85 range, is fantastic for video. If you're going to be shooting a lot of video, or your camera is really high end and it has 60 or 40 megapixels, then getting something around that 70 to 85 megabyte speed is fantastic. However, if your primary use is just photo, a standard SDXC card is more than enough. You don't have to go anywhere crazy with it, but I do recommend starting at least 64 gigabytes. That's a really important number to hit. I think just overall, anything smaller than that, even if you're, say you're not going to take a lot of photos, it can fill up very quickly. Your picture should never live on the memory card. I get customers all the time who come in and they just keep constantly buying memory cards. Download your photos off your card, delete them after you're done, and keep reusing your card. The whole point of using it is like a car. The SD card is like a vehicle. You live at home, you go to work. You travel in between the two. The SD card is doing the same thing. It stays in your camera, you take the pictures, you untake it, you take it out, you put it in your computer, you put it back into your camera. And it's this cycle of going back and forth. So it should never live on there. You should be deleting them, going through your photos, and moving on to the next. To not lose your pictures or damage the card while transferring those images off, these are my 7 or 8 steps that I have that I think are the way you should be doing it. Now, people sometimes have their own variation of this. You can shorten this if you need to, but this is the most simple. You start by turning your camera off and waiting at least 5 seconds. I say that because your camera has internal components that are running at all times. You can hear the electronics in there when you turn it on and you hold it up to your ear. When you take a photo, you hear the shutter. The shutter isn't just a sound effect that the camera does. The shutter is literally your camera opening and closing its shutter in order to burn the image into the sensor, which then saves to the memory card. So when you're done using a camera, you've taken your photos or your video, turn it off, wait the 5 seconds to make sure that it powers off. A little experiment that you can do too. Turn the camera off, hold it by your ear, you'll hear this kind of power down sound that it's doing. That's the electronic component shutting off and going into like a stasis mode, if you will. After that, then remove your SD card, and you can then place that into a card reader. I like to always say try to avoid using your camera to transfer photos to your device, being your laptop or your computer. The reason being is that having the camera plugged into the computer just adds to the risk of damaging it. I have a dog at home. I can't tell you how many times his tail has caught something with my camera and pulled it down. I've had one camera that's broken because of him. I love him dearly though. Never a chew situation, but always just the fact that tail is always moving. Same thing though, if you have a glass of water or maybe a drink by you while you're doing editing or you're plugging things into the computer, it's really easy to replace the SD card or make sure you get your laptop out of the way. And now if your camera's on the table mixed in with that, you're rushing to grab and pull everything off. Chances of you breaking, dropping, or just ruining everything is much higher. So always take the card out of the camera, insert that into the computer to start downloading the images, and use a card reader too. That's a big recommendation that I have. Some computers will have SD card slots on the side. Mine does not right now, but some do. But I like to have separate card readers. My personal favorite, the one that I own myself, is this little piece called the trifecta. It ends in both a USB-A and a USB-C. So depending on the age of your computer, if you have a newer model, which most laptops now only run on USB-C, that's becoming the universal standard. A lot of older laptops or computers will still have your USB-A. So use one, pick whichever one works best for you. If you're limited on charging plugs, the one on the far left actually has little hubs on there. So you can plug other devices in and charge at the same time. So if you want to charge your cell phone or the camera or a battery, you can actually plug right into there and keep that off to the side. Those are nice options too. And the two ones on the right are more for your higher end carts. Depending on the camera quality that you have, or depending on what you've got going on, that might be necessary for you. But if you don't have something that uses a compact flash card, which my two people in front of me today do not, then using one of the standard ones is more than enough and does the same job. Now, once we've got that plugged in and we have the card now inserted into the card reader, we got the next kind of big steps to this. And we're going to then first start by clicking somewhere on the computer and making a new folder. Typically, when I make a folder on the computer and start transferring my images, I have a system that's built into my computer where basically I have every year of photos that I've taken. I have photos dating all the way back to early 2000s, 2002, 2001, all the way till now. Every folder is listed by the year of which I took the pictures. From there I click into the folder and I have every month listed in that folder. Once I click into the month that I want to then put these photos in or look at old photos, I then have all the events and times that I brought my camera out with me to then look at what I have available. So if I'm going to, let's say, my kid's baseball game, or I'm going to, on vacation to Australia, I'm going to label it whatever that event was with then maybe the month and the date, so that way I have it for my knowledge and my recollection. However you want to organize your folders and however you want to be able to find your photos the fastest, that's how I recommend to do it. So if this is only a camera you're bringing out to your kids' baseball games, or you're only bringing this out when you go on vacation, or you only do it for XYZ purposes, then label whatever folders you're putting your images in that best fits for you. So once you've got your destination folder, whatever you've labeled it as, we're going to copy those photos over to the destination folder. We want to make sure we don't move them, but we copy them. So we're duplicating the photos from the SD card over to the actual computer itself, to that folder. The reason we don't want to move them is because for any reason we get disrupted during the transfer, our computer dies, the SD card unplugs, the little one or the dog comes by and unplugs something on accident, we run the risk of losing all the photos that we just took. When the photos are in transition of moving from one section to the other, there is a chance where when they're in that kind of limbo point, that if anything becomes disconnected, it's all gone. So by making a copy of them, we're ensuring that we leave them on the SD card and that we're just making a duplication of them on the computer. So preferably copy them. When you're using Windows, the easiest way to find all this stuff is through the Explorer icon on your computer. And if you're using Mac, it's going to be the Finder icon. Depending on which system you're running, you'll be able to find those right away. They're usually in the bottom left corner of your computer. After that,
does Mac have Explorer Windows, or just?
No, the Mac's going to have Finder.
Okay, that's what I looked at. Okay.
So the next thing we're going to do is copy those to a second place. We want to have a backup to make sure that we're insured and that nothing happens to our photos. Again, same idea. Water spills on the computer, you don't have the computer anymore, where's all your photos? If they're on the computer, chances are they're gone. So my personal preference is, at least the things I've got listed there, an external hard drive is my personal favorite. You buy those things for $100 all the way up to $200. You can probably get one for $50, $60 too online. Those are great ways of storing your photos and making sure you've got something tangible that you can hide or put away somewhere. I keep one in a safe under my bed. I keep one then next to my computer. I've got artwork that dates at least 30 years on my physical hard drive, stuff that I've done in my schooling, stuff I do for my professional stuff for galleries, and then just my fun stuff on there. If I ever lost all that, I'd be devastated. So I keep an external hard drive in multiple locations just to ensure that I don't lose anything ever. Google Photos is a great thing to use, as well as the Google Drive, and then Amazon also has their own Prime Photos on there too. If you have an Amazon subscription, you literally have access to all this stuff completely for free. Great part about that is that anywhere in the world that you go, as long as you sign into Prime Photos or Google Drive, you can access those photos. So I've got customers that are going on safari this summer. They come in to buy a camera. Now they want a way of doing this double storage rather than just putting it on their laptop. Well, they can also use Prime Photos or the Google Drive. The seventh step on here is then ejecting the card before physically removing it. If you're using Windows, if you left click on the image itself, or on the little SD card itself, there should be an option to eject the card. Just eject to make sure that it properly stops running the program on your card, and then you can remove that from the computer. If you're using a Mac, you're going to just drag it down to the trash can, and that's going to eject the card there for you. Formatting will erase all old info on the card. So if we format the card inside the camera, we insert the card back in, go to our menu settings on the camera, find the format section. We can then erase everything on there, and we make sure that the card is set up and ready to go for our camera specifically. No matter what you do, the first time you use the camera, you should format the card inside the camera. It's preferable. What tends to happen is if you don't format the card in the camera, you could run the risk of running out of room on the card faster. So my best example is with my Nikon that I own. When I use my cards that are formatted on my Sony camera, I lose out on about 100 photos. There's 100 photos on the card that I can't take, basically, because of the way the card's formatted. If I format the card inside the inside the Nikon, then now it'll delete all the information on the old card. However, now that card is primed and ready for the specific camera that I'm using, so I get another extra 100 photos out of doing it. Depending on what you're doing, that might sound like nothing, that might also sound like a lot. Again, it's a good force of habit to just format the card inside the camera.
What does that mean, format?
You go to your settings, and there should be a button that says format. It will erase all the old photos on the card, but then what it does is it primes it so that way you get the most out of the SD card. So once you've formatted and erased everything on there, that's one option. The other option too, if you're only using the one camera, you've gone through, you've formatted the card on the camera itself, you can always then just delete everything from the camera on the computer. So if you're, let's say on a MacBook, you should be able to select all the images, drag them down to the trash can, and delete them. If you're on a Windows computer, you can select all the images, hit the left click, and then hit delete as well. That'll then delete everything that's on the camera. So they're both two options that you can use on there. So this is overall the backup plan. I'm using images now to really dumb it down. Start with the SD card. That's the vehicle that drives you in between the camera and the computer. You don't live, photos don't live on there, just like you don't live out in your car. They live on there only to transfer from one location to the other. Once they've been transferred to the one area, they should basically be on your computer. You can always send the photos to a phone or your tablet, and that's totally fine. I'm not poo-pooing on that. My only big thing with that is that if you do that, you could diminish the quality of the images. So if you've got a really nice higher-end camera that takes amazing photos, putting them on the phone can sometimes diminish the quality. Keeping them on the computer, for all intents and purposes, will keep them at their prime image. From there, then, you can move them to your phone, send to friends, to text out, to email, whatever's easiest, but they should live on the computer. From the computer, I recommend then putting them in another place. So they're on the computer, put them in a hard drive, or put them in a cloud-based solution. Those are the two options that I would recommend doing. I personally like the hard drive because I like having a tangible item. Some people can't stand it. They don't want to have extra stuff. They're worried about losing that or misplacing it or breaking it. Then try Amazon Prime Photos, try Google Drive. I have a few other options on the next slide. They're really great. I do recommend them. So Google Drive being one of those. OneDrive, if you have an Outlook email for work, a lot of people have Outlook for their email. Outlook also has their own storage capacity on there that you can then access anywhere that you enter your email address. And then Adobe Creative Cloud is the other personal favorite of mine. That one you pay a monthly subscription to, but then you get things like Lightroom, Photoshop, InDesign. You get all the photo editor and video editing apps on there. So if you are interested in editing and playing with your videos and your images that you're taking, that's a great place to go to. On top of that, then you get the Creative Cloud, which is their storage system that you can access anywhere. So now we'll get into a tour of your camera. Now, it's important to understand the differences between cameras, because there's multiple cameras out there. The two big ones we're going to talk about today, or the two main ones, I should say, that are out there, are going to be mirrorless and DSLR. Now, there are other cameras. For example, you have a point-and-shoot camera. which for all intents and purposes is a mirrorless camera. The only difference is that the lens isn't removable. No other big major changes with that other than the sensor size itself, which we don't talk about now. It's mainly in the intermediate class, but we can talk a little bit about it too. Camera sensors have different sizes. A camera sensor is the same. You can look at a camera sensor the same way you look at film. A 35 millimeter film roll basically had a film that was maybe the size of 2 stamps or 3 stamps next to each other. The full frame camera has a sensor that is the same size as one of those 35 millimeter stills. A crop sensor camera is cropped inwards to make it smaller than that 35 millimeter still. And then the point and shoot camera has an even smaller crop size to it, which makes it even smaller than the 35 millimeter still. All that means is that because it's cropped in, there's a little less playing with it on the computer after the fact. So if you're not a big editor, you're not trying to change every aspect of your photo, you're not trying to crop in on the photo, then there really is no difference from getting a point and shoot mirrorless or DSLR. Where you see the difference is when you start to edit and you do more professional based work, or you turn into a pseudo and hobbyist who just wants the best of the best or to keep upgrading their gear. But DSLRs and mirrorless are going to be the two main things that you're going to see nowadays. DSLR cameras stand for a digital single lens reflex. Mirrorless just means that that mirror that's on the inside of the camera on the DSLR is no longer there. Light comes in through the camera when you're pointing at whatever image it is, hits off the mirror, hits off what's called a pentaprism, which is a little light box on the top of the camera, and then bounces through the shutter and optical viewfinder. This is why when you had a DSLR or you had a film camera, when that lens is on, you put your eye through the viewfinder, you can still see through it regardless if the camera's on or off. Mirrorless, you can't do that anymore. Mirrorless, what you get is what you get, only works when you're actually using the digital or when the camera's turned on. The light comes in, it's the image sensor. From there then we're able to see what we're looking at. The shutter then is in front too, that comes across or snaps up and down in order for us to get the image. And that's why you hear that click noise when you take a photo. DSLRs are going away. I've been saying it for about a year. They've probably got about 2 more years, a year left of shelf life before you don't see any more DSLRs, and we go fully mirrorless. DSLRs are a little bulkier, a little taller, they're thicker, they're bigger cameras, they're pretty clunky. Mirrorless really tried to get smaller, to get easier to use, just to be more compact and personal, so that way you're not lugging around this giant camera everywhere you go. However, you get the big lenses, you get a more advanced body, depending on the mirrorless series, you can get up to the same weight or that size as the old DSLR. So don't let mirrorless fool you. If you're trying to go for the best of the cameras, if you get a high-end mirrorless camera, that's what you're going to get. John, I'd like to subscribe to live TV shows. Well, you can subscribe to our channel as far as live TV shows. I won't know how to tell you about that, John. Sometimes there's comments on here that I know, sometimes I'm like, okay. So going into your camera, now one thing I will say with this is that every camera body is going to be slightly different. This is going to be an example of a DSLR camera, so this is going to be an example of the older tech. However, the thing with the DSLR that I will say is that most of these buttons are going to be found on your camera, whether that is through the function button or the I or the Q button, which I'll explain a little bit later, or it might just be in a different spot of your camera that you're just not seeing right away. However, every function this camera has, you also have on your cameras too.
Me too?
Yes, even you. The only difference between yours is literally your lens is just always on, your lens comes off, and you can put whatever lens you want. It's the only major difference when you think about the structure of it, button-wise, functionality-wise. Not the big then difference that comes later is the detail, the editing that you can do, more of the post stuff on the photo. Video start and stop is going to be one that you'll see in the beginning. There's somewhere on your camera should be a red dot. Could be a red circle, red dot. What that's going to be is your video. When you're shooting on your camera, if you do one click on that, that should start or stop your video depending on if you clicked it before or didn't. Power switch. Usually a power switch is going to be somewhere around your shutter release button. Simple on and off button, that's how you're turning the camera on and off. If you have interchangeable lenses, I beg you, please turn your camera off first before you take the lens on and off. The sensor itself has like a little self-cleaning mode that it goes through after it turns off. You want to make sure it does that. It kind of just leaves the sensor at a certain point, so when you put the new lens on and then put the new lens off and then on, it just ensures that the camera is together, complete. So power switch, shutter release button. Pushing on the shutter release button, that's what's going to capture your image for you. So when you are taking a video or an image, depending on what setting you're on the camera, that shutter release is that click noise. Half a click on the shutter release is your focus. So if you don't push all the way down on the shutter button, you're going to notice that green squares or red squares will pop up on the camera. That's how you know your camera's locking into certain targets and focusing. Through the menu system, through settings on there, you can customize how many of those you see, what you're getting out of that, all sorts of different stuff. From there we have exposure compensation. So it should be a little black and white box with a plus and a triangle on there. Now that's going to be in a different location for everybody, but what exposure compensation basically is it takes the value of your whole frame and it either makes it lighter or darker. So let's say you're out and about, you're shooting, you've got your ISO set to a good number so you can pick up as much outside light, you've got your aperture set to a 2.8, your shutter speed is at, let's say, 101 and 250th of a second, the image is still coming out really dark. Exposure compensation should assist you with making sure that you lighten the image or darken the image. And if everything I just said feels like mumbo jumbo to you, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. That's going to be for next week's class where we talk about all those settings and how to change those numbers. For now, start with automatic. Always be on the green auto button for the camera if you don't know what I'm talking about. But overall, exposure compensation for the more complex people will help you make the overall image you're taking lighter or darker. Your mode dial, which we'll dive into, I believe, on the next slide before we continue going through everything, is going to be your gear shift in your car. That's what puts you from park to reverse to drive to neutral. That's what puts you through all the different settings of your camera. Some people will have a dial on there, other people will just have a little button. And that little button might, for example, for like your camera, might just say photo, video, S&Q. Those are going to also be very similar to your mode drive, where you're basically able to switch between the different operations of your camera. Now this is a DSLR only switch, but the live view switch. On your old cameras, you had to toggle a switch in order to switch the mirror up and then look through the screen of the camera to then versus have the mirror down where you're just looking through the viewfinder. Neither of you guys have that, so you don't have to worry about that feature. Command dial is going to be similar to the mode dial, except the command dial only works when you're not on automatic. So if you're not shooting on auto, let's say you're shooting on aperture priority. That could be your aperture control right there. Let's say you're shooting on shutter priority. That would be your shutter priority, where then it's changing the numbers for you. So if you're using more advanced settings on the camera, that's where command dial comes in, because it then gives you the ability to move those numbers around and shift what you're using. Start with auto. I can't say that enough. It really is a big deterrent when you see people who are just first getting into using cameras and they buy a camera, they spend money on it, they try to use it, they get blurry images or just bad pictures, and they're very confused. The best way I can acquaint it is to driving a car. When you first were learning to drive, they didn't just give you a car and say, give it a shot. You sat there with somebody else that kind of held your hand through the process as you were going through it. Automatic is basically your chaperone in the car with you as you're going. It's the one that's guiding you, that's saying, okay, the light looks like this, your subject is this far away, it's not moving, so this is the settings we're going to use in order for you to get that picture. Once you get better at it and you learn how to use it, the settings then become more available to you and you have those things that you can use. But starting with auto is a great way to just get to learn the camera, feel more comfortable with it, and to get good to okay images.
So I have it on ISO auto, so I'm good.
That's for the ISO specifically. your camera setting, unless you've changed anything on there, which I can't imagine that you probably have since you just got it, it's automatically going to be an auto. So in order to change it, that's where you'd have to go dig through the menu a little bit to figure it all out. For those that have the mode dial, I like to show this image too. Mode dials can look very different between every camera that you look at. I know this is Sony over here. That's what I shoot on, or one of the cameras that I shoot on. This should be your Nikon over here, and then this should be your Canon over here. Every mode dial is going to look a little different on every camera that you see out there, but the main switches or the main things are there for you. And for that, I mean these. The auto or the A+ is auto control over settings and functions. And this full manual, that's full manual control over the camera's array of functions. That's you physically changing every little detail in order to make sure that you're getting the image you want. Stick with auto, if any of this sounds confusing. Aperture priority control just means that you're controlling the aperture, which we'll get into more next week on how that works. Don't want to throw the whole book at you today. Shutter priority, or S or TV, is also going to be the control of just the shutter. Program is aperture and shutter speeds are auto, but everything else is changeable. So I like the P on there, the program, because you're able to shoot on just full automatic. However, if let's say that you want to set the camera to focus on humans or dogs or trains, a lot of these cameras have that setting. If you don't want a big wide focus area, you can have it where it's just a little box on your screen, so I just focus on what's in the center. If I want something that is a little more tight, maybe not just a square, I can do something a little like that, bracketing on there too. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do under program aperture, or sorry, just the program switch, the P, that you can't do on automatic. But however, the beauty of automatic is there with the P. And then the last thing is B, which stands for bulb. Back in the day, the easiest way I can describe this is that when old-time photographers had to take pictures for the news or for events, because rooms didn't have the most advanced lighting at the time, they would put this kind of goofy little cape thing over their head and sit there, and they'd have this big bulb stick that'd be coming out, and it would be the most obnoxious flash, and you'd hear a pop. That's what the B stands for, it's that bulb. But the big thing with this one is the reason that it was called bulb was that when you use the B setting on your camera, the shutter that you have stays open for a long period of time, as long as you want it to stay open. From there, then, when you press the button again, or release the button, it then closes the shutter. This is what gives you long exposures. So if you are doing astrophotography, or you're doing stuff that requires you to have long exposure of the image that you're taking a photo of, B is a lot of the times the setting that you might want to use. If you are interested in taking astrophotography, it's not my biggest cup of tea. I definitely recommend looking up some tips and tricks online. Tripods will be necessary for it so you don't get a shaky image, but I mean some of the stuff you can get out there, especially if you get away from the city and you go somewhere where there's not a lot of light.
Is that those big lenses?
Well, that's one of them, but sometimes with astrophotography you can get it with just your regular camera itself, but it's based on the settings that you set your camera to. Long exposure photography needs to have just a lot of light coming into it because you're outside, it's dark, and you've got a sky full of stars. You basically have to set your camera to stay open for a longer period of time to absorb all the light that's around. That's what using the bulb setting can give you the opportunity to do. Now scenes, I don't talk about this nearly as much anymore, but they're all automatic modes. I think scenes are useless. I don't think they actually do anything. I will argue that to a T. Especially in nowadays, automatic by itself is so powerful. It does so many good things for the user. It's really made cameras more accessible to people than shooting even 10, 15 years ago did, where you really had to look and you're like, the image doesn't look good, let me take another picture. Automatic is just phenomenal nowadays on these cameras. However though, if you are someone that likes to use scenes, I'm not knocking you for it. Scenes are developed so that way you can set your camera to whatever scene you're taking. If I'm at my kid's track meet and they're running down the track, I might want to set it to the little running man symbol. That's going to be for fast-moving images or sports. If it's nighttime, I might want to set it to the picture of the black star with the white background to symbolize night. If I'm taking a close-up image of a flower, a bug, a rose, a bird, whatever it is, I can then use the little flower symbol and that'll do close-up photography. The mountains for landscape, the heads for portrait, the little flash symbol with a line going through it is no flash. CA, I do not know, so don't ask me. I've actually never seen that on a camera. It's on this one and I don't know what that actually means. But yeah, scenes are automatic modes for your camera. In my opinion, they're useless, but for some people that really like them, again, everyone's got a preference. Going back into the anatomy of the camera. So the flash button, you're going to see that on there. If you have a camera that has a pop-up flash, which for having Sonys, neither of you do, the beauty of Sony cameras is the fact that they really don't need flashes unless you're taking very dark pictures. Like I was telling you earlier, if you're taking pictures for venues or for clubs, you might have where they've got strobe lights or they've got really intense blue, purple, pink lights going everywhere. They don't emit a lot of lumens, and because of that, they don't pick up as easy on the camera, so you probably want a flash for that. But you're in downtown Chicago, you got one street lamp coming down on a cool car, you're like, ooh, that'd be fun. It's real late at night and it's dark. That light is enough that your camera's sensitivity should pick up and you should be able to get that image in good crispness. If you can't, then getting a flash would be great for that, or using pop-up flash would be great. The function button, FN button, is different for everybody. On an older camera like this, the FN button would control a certain switch, a setting, something you can change. On the newer Sony cameras, for example, the FN button brings you into the more advanced menu system for changing some features on there. Those are usually only accessible when you're in the program auto or anything else that's manual. If you're in regular automatic and you go to press that, you're going to notice that a lot of them are either grayed out or not available. Zoom ring, that's pretty self-explanatory. On your lens, that's your ability to switch between, in this case, the 18mm or the 55mm. In your case, since you don't have a zoom ring, it's on the top right corner, right where the shutter button is. You have it, unfortunately, yeah, you do not have a zoom lens, as we talked about earlier.
What's that mean? I can't see. Oh.
Some of these mirrorless cameras and DSLR cameras have what's called a prime lens, and we'll talk about that next week too. Prime lenses are better for background to foreground separation. Like that's a very crisp lens. For 1.8, you can blur a background out almost completely and just have focus on the subject. However, though, if you want to get closer to something, you gotta walk your butt over there and take it closer, or back up if you want to get wider. It's the only downside to it. From there then, focus ring is on there too. Your focus ring is on the front. If you're not using automatic focus, then you use manual focus. Manual focus is great for video, in my opinion, but not as great for regular photography anymore, because autofocus on these cameras is spot on, it's very quick, it's great. Lens retract button. That's a button you don't see on many cameras anymore, but for the older cameras that don't necessarily have automatic focus or an advanced system on the inside of the camera, they're wobbly, they can move around. Some people, when they see that, they think it's broken, and so to fix that, what they did is they put a lock button on there, so that way when you're not using the lens, you can lock it into place and it doesn't click off. I have a Nikon at home that I sometimes shoot on, the Nikon ZF. With that being said, the lens is 24 to 70mm. It has a lens retract. Lens release. When you have a camera that can change lenses, you're going to have a button on there that helps release the lens. You hold the button in, turn the camera lens counterclockwise, the lens pops off, you can then put a cap on, or you can put another lens. It's important to remember that when you take that lens off, put the dust cap cover back onto the body as quick as you can. Dust can settle inside the lens, it can leave marks on there, and it won't necessarily damage your camera. However, it will give you spots on the image that will be noticeable to you. People that don't have any interchangeable lenses, you don't have to worry about that. Just make sure you clean the lens that's on there nicely. Don't use your sweater. It's my biggest recommendation. With your glasses, use the little lens cleaning cloth that comes with them. Drive mode button, that's in the bottom for this camera. Now, other places it'll be in other places, but you'll usually see a stack of squares or a little timer logo on your camera somewhere. What that basically is it's the way your camera's mode is driving itself. So if you have one single box, that means single photo. If If you've got boxes that are stacked up on each other like that, going in an angle, that's burst photos. So best example for that, you go to the aquarium, they've got the dolphin exhibit going, the dolphin's going backwards like this. That's going to be your ability to take as many pictures as you can. That's where you're going to get that sport kind of mode. But what that's going to do is that odds are, if you've got something that's moving that quickly, one of those images should come out real crisp. And that's what that's used for. The other feature on there's timer, which I don't really use anymore on my cameras, because nowadays, like the two cameras you both have right now, have an app that you can download on your phone, and that can be your timer, where you set it up, hit the remote button, and then take your picture. It's all available on there. Moving to the back of the camera, so menu button. We talked about that FN button being the advanced menu, or being the quick menu, I should say. Well, the menu button on the camera is going to be your way of getting into the camera's internal settings. So things like your time and date, your formatting for the card, your, let's say, layout, where things, certain function or command buttons are. You can change those in the menu system. Color balance, which not a lot of people mess with on the cameras. They set those before you get them, but some people are particular and they have their methodology for it. That's stuff that you can access in the menu button. Is it necessary? Probably not. Diopter adjustment. For my 4-eye friends, we have a hard time seeing. It's like a pair of binoculars. When you put them up to your eyes, you can readjust until things look crisp and clear. The diopter does the same thing with your viewfinder. If you have a viewfinder, you'll have a little dial next to it. That's your diopter. Info button. You don't see this a lot anymore, and most cameras still have it, but it's kind of hidden. Usually you'll press like the display button a bunch of times and that'll show it. But the info button is your way of looking at the information of the photo, is the best way to put it. So if you take a picture on automatic and you're like, wow, this looks amazing, I love how this happened, what did my camera do? How did it choose to do all these settings? If I press the info button, it'll tell me what the f-stop, the shutter, and the ISO the camera chose to use. I use the info button, or I used to use the info button as a great informational guide for myself as a photographer to help me understand what my camera brains were telling the camera to do so that I could then figure it out on manual. When I shoot, I typically only shoot between aperture or shutter priority, and then when I'm just doing fun photography, I do my manual settings. From there, we then have exposure lock or focus lock. It's very similar to pressing down halfway on the button. If you have the EFL or AEL or AFL button, all that means is that you're locking in on the exposure or the focus. And from there, what you're getting is the ability to just lock, stay in place, and then take your photo. The best way I can describe this is, let's say you're doing product photos. I had a woman who came in one time who was taking pictures for her friend's restaurant. She had a tripod set up, they were going to put the food on the table, and they basically were going to do a shoot with every dish on the menu to prepare it for Uber Eats or Grubhub, whatever it was, or their website maybe even too. I recommended she use the focus and exposure lock because she could set her tripod up, and let's say that, I don't think anyone online can see it, but her plate of food, let's say, is on the table like this. She's taking the pictures of the food, and once she makes sure she's got the settings and everything else, she could remove the plate, mark with a little maybe piece of tape where the plate was, and she could literally just keep sliding different plates through and pressing the button. The focus and exposure lock locked into place exactly where she was, the distance and everything else. So it takes one giant part of her having to get the camera position and get the image every single time out of the equation. So it can make, in her case, she probably, I think, had to do 50 or 60 different dishes that they prepared. She got to do that literally maybe in an hour instead of having to do 2 to 3 hours to set everything back up per food, per item. The function button is very similar to the I button, where the I button, then you press on this, should give you access to the menu system of quick choices. Every camera labels theirs a little different. I have a camera at home that does the I button as the Q button. This camera that I have now, the Nikon, has an I button. My Sony has an FN button. Everybody's cameras are a little bit different, but if you press on that, it should take you to a menu system of some sort where you can make changes, but if you're an automatic, you have no access to those changes. That's only done through program auto, aperture, shutter, manual, or both. The OK button, that's your enter button, pretty self-explanatory there. Press that to say OK to whatever action you're trying to do. Multi-selector, also pretty simple. That's your little D-pad, if you will, from your phone. That's you to click through the camera to find the images, everything else. Magnifier button, demagnifier button, makes the image larger, makes the image smaller. I use the demagnifier and the magnifier button all the time because after I take my image, I want to zoom in and see how crisp everything looks to see if I want to keep that image. I usually, though, do not delete the photos on the camera. The only reason being is that taking a photo uses a little bit of battery. Deleting a photo uses more battery. So if you're not in the mode or mood to buy a second battery and you just want to keep one with you, you don't want to lug something else with you, my recommendation is to delete all the photos when you get home and plug this thing into the computer. Then that's a perfect time for you to blow the image up, see how things look, see how bad things are, because technically, I mean for me, for example, I just shared a bunch of pictures I got in Germany. I was in Germany for 2 days for a conference at Leica for their cameras. While I was out there, I took maybe 3,000 photos. When I took these photos, I take about 3 to 5 photos of one single thing. And I do that because I want to make sure that I get it crisply enough, because I don't have time to sit there and look through it right on the spot. So shoot, 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 you reposition, shoot again, focus, shoot, shoot. Okay, move to the next. From there, when I get home, I put those 5 photos up and I scroll through them and I go, okay, this one looks bad, delete it. This one looks okay, let's move to the next. This one looks okay, move to the next, delete this one, delete this one. Okay, now I've got 2 photos left. Which one's the best out of those 2? Give yourselves options. For human, now you're never going to take a perfect photo every single time, but it'd be a real shame if you went and you saw a phenomenon of some kind and you got a picture and then you go home, you know, after the thing's done, and you're like, oh, it's blurry. Take a few photos. I think it's worth it. Load the SD card up as best as you can, so that way when you're going through it, it might take more work. However, you'll find that gem of a photo in there. Customer emailed me this photo when I first started here. My camera doesn't work. I have an expression that I think with like baseball. It's not the bat, it's the baseman, it's the batter.
Yeah.
We get kind of wrapped up in this thing where we think we're flawless, and we think that these things are just, you know, the most perfect pieces of technology, whether it's a phone, a camera, anything else. Everything makes mistakes. They can't always do the thing we want them to do. Our camera works in a similar manner. If we aren't taking the time to focus in on an image, or we're using manual controls, or we're doing things that we're not familiar with, we can get an image that looks like this, where it's like, oh, why does this look so pixelated and blurry? Oh, it's because I didn't know what I was taking a picture of. So take your time with the camera, make sure you understand it, practice. That's the biggest thing I can recommend, and I think that's on a slide in a second here. First thing I say, your camera isn't a smartphone. They designed these cameras on the smartphone to be, for a lack of a better term, idiot-proof. It is so easy to point a phone nowadays and take a picture. It's so simple. And they spoiled us with that when you really think about it in the long run. They took something that felt more complicated. Like I can just remember days of waiting after I submitted my film to get developed, and just waiting a week for it to get shipped back to me, or even taking it to Walgreens as a kid to download, to get everything weighted, and you know they call you back 3 days later, it's ready to go. The phone spoiled us because it's instantaneous. You get it immediately. It's the most quickest photos since Polaroid. I mean, it's so fast how they come. However, settings, the controls, everything else, it's designed to be at your fingertips and simple. Your camera is going to take much higher quality images that you can edit, you can blow up, you can print, you can do a lot of cool things with a camera. However, things that a camera can do, a cell phone can do as well too, and vice versa. The things that your phone can do, a camera can do. But that sense of ease, that kind of quick turnaround, that, you know, instant gratification that a phone delivers, Our camera might not do that. So be prepared for that at first, especially when you're learning. It takes a little bit of time to become comfortable with it. I just bought a new camera 3 weeks ago for myself. It's my 5th or 6th camera in my arsenal. I am still learning how to use that, even though I've been shooting for over 15 years now, and I'm familiar with a lot of different cameras. It takes some time. This might seem simple, but for the beginner class, I think it's necessary. Before I teach you little tips and tricks on how to take a really good photo, holding your camera. Art, photography, videography, the 2 leading causes for people who don't like to stop doing it are arthritis and carpal tunnel. Best practices with it are to make sure your wrists are relaxed. Use a neck strap when you can so you're not lugging this thing around with you. And try not to lock your fingers in weird positions. That will add to it. When you're using a camera, your elbows should not be out. You are not a bird. Do not flap your wings when you take a photo. Lap your arms underneath your body when you're shooting and keep your camera pointed forward. The other way to look at it is that by tucking your arms into your rib cage or into the sides, is that you're giving yourself more stability. It's harder to pull or to push and do stuff than if your arms are out here. If someone bumps you while you've got your new expensive camera, that could hit the floor and break, and you're gonna be really upset. So keep them down to your sides, lock in, one hand on the bottom of your camera, one hand on the side of your camera. Now, obviously, if you've got a small little camera or a point and shoot model, using one hand is probably fine, but it is a little awkward, especially if you have a viewfinder. So go ahead and use 2. But when you're using the 2, again, keep one hand underneath, one hand on the side. If you need to put both hands on the side of your camera, you can shoot like this too, but try not to put your arms out because you're just asking for trouble, and you're also asking for no stability, which, again, a bad thing. And I think I have another slide. If you're moving or the camera's moving, you're going to get a blurry image. That's just how it goes. So arms down to the side. The other thing is your back. People complain about back problems all the time. I have them myself. I've been playing hockey for many years. Try your best not to lean backwards or to lean forwards when you're taking a picture. Keep a nice straightened back. It's the same rule. When you go to lift or pick stuff up, you grab with your legs, not with your back when you're picking things up. Photography should be treated the same way. Just again, longevity, no soreness, to enjoy what you're doing. Focus, then shoot, and shoot through the whole picture. It seems simple, but I get customers all the time where they're like, well, I'm just trying to take a picture of, I'm looking through the window right now, that TV right there, that big TV. I just want that picture. Well, that's great. That is part of the image, but so is everything else going on in the image. So focus. Focus on the whole image that you have in front of you. Make sure your camera's set properly to do what you're trying to accomplish. Shoot, and you're shooting through the entirety of the image. You can't just be focused in on one little detail, because sometimes that's not going to happen, especially the first time you start taking pictures of stuff. You're looking for that owl in your images, you didn't see it. Exactly. You're looking for one thing, and you got a whole bunch of stuff going on. You lost it. So it's those little things. Obviously, you'll probably be able to see the owls again, so it's not the end of the world. However, if you're going on that safari, or you're going to Egypt to go see the pyramids, and you do the same thing and you don't get that image, you're going to kick yourself for the rest of your life. It's going to be a bummer. So focus, then shoot, and then shoot through the entirety of the image. There it is. If you or the camera are moving, you will get blurry photos. Take your time. Let it load. If you need to, use a tripod, but don't move. There's a real famous photographer who made a career out of walking around and just taking his camera in New York and quick picture. And he'd get really fun images, but then they'd be blurry in some parts. That was something he was after. He was looking for that. You are not them. So focus. Don't move. Don't let the camera move. You're going to get blurry pictures if you do. So these are my basics, my backgrounds. I went to the School of the Art Institute downtown. My degree is in painting and drawing. I have galleries sometimes. I have shows that I display my work at. I make comic books in my free time now that I sell in comic shops throughout Chicago. But when I was painting originally, I would paint 6-foot-tall canvases. I'd paint life-size portraits. I couldn't just carry that portrait with me and show people. It wouldn't make sense. So my teachers were like, hey, you got to learn how to take a picture or use a camera in order to like show your work off. No one cares. So these are what I was taught to just get better at taking a crisp, clean picture, and that's kind of the information that then I bestow onto you. So first and foremost, fill the frame. I'm going to use a couple different terms here. These are for portrait pictures for the most part, but if you're taking product pictures or a flower or a bird or anything, your kids, you want to fill the frame. We have what we call negative or dead space all around the picture on the left side here. And it's not a bad image, but when we look at her on the left side, we can see that there is the molding on the wall that casts really bad and harsh shadows. We have the sunlight coming on the left where we can basically see the window sill or the window frame. All this stuff doesn't add to her, it distracts from her for the most part. You might be needing a picture for your website or for a resume or a, maybe just an updated Facebook photo. You don't want all the extra frills going around because it distracts from the main part of the image, which is you. So focus in, fill the frame, crop stuff out that's not needed, and it just leads to having a much more crisp and clean image. You can always do it in post too, but sometimes depending on the camera that you have, like for example, both have crop sensor cameras, there's only a certain point where you can keep cropping in before it starts to get blurry. So doing that right away with the cameras that you have is more helpful than doing it later on. Eyes in the top third of the image. If you basically break an image down and you break it into 3 sections, and you can do it in different ways, we call it the rules of third, and we'll talk about that in the next slide, but basically you have a right side, a left side, a center side. Then you have a top side, a bottom side, and then the center side again. So going from right to left to top to bottom, you're going to have 9 different sections on the photo. If we can then take that image and make sure if we divide this into 3 lines, so we got one going this way, from right to left, and one going this way. If the eyes can hit that top line or be in the top third of the image, it's going to be more appealing towards us visually. When a human looks at an image, or especially figuratively, we always try to find the similarities between us and that image. That's why figurative work is so popular. When you go to museums, you see portraits of people, statues of people, even just weird statues or weird pictures that kind of look human-like. We like that kind of stuff. We see ourselves in that. So keeping your eyes of your picture or whoever it is in the top third can't help. Focus in on the eyes. The eyes, that cheesy line or the gateway to the soul. The eyes have sometimes the most color, the most interesting part of a human. Hair color, depending on the color that it is, can be just your standard colors. Skin tone, we're all familiar with the different skin tones that are out there. Clothing, I would say, is the next big unique thing, but eyes, especially different color eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes, they all can have a very fun, descriptive kind of color pattern to them. And in this case, the same idea. And if we look at this image too, comparing it to the last image, the rule of thirds is being followed almost perfectly to a T. The eye is definitely on the top portion of that. This is more for kid photography. I've got a couple nieces and nephews in my family, and so when I'm taking pictures of them, one of the things that I notice is that they're very tiny and they're small. And when you take a picture and shoot down at somebody, they're small. So getting on their level will kind of, number one, elevate them up a little bit to give them much more hierarchy in the photo, if you will. It doesn't make them look so kind of little or insignificant. This looks like a fun, candid photo of a birthday party. A lot of different stuff is going on in there. However, it's just that. It's a candid shot. It doesn't look like a professional shot or a studio setup or something that adds more value to it. However, we move over to the next one, and we can see a little bit more professionalism. Now, whether this was staged, whether this is real, whatever the case might be, we have more focus going on with the blur in the background. We can still make out that it's either his sister or his friend or his cousin or his or whoever it is, not nephew though. We can see that difference. We got the birthday cake off to the side, but the way that this is shaped, number one, got rid of that filler space. The other photo, while it was candid and it looked very natural and it looked very fun, also had a lot going on that we probably didn't need. All this extra grass over here is a little distracting. The tables over, or the broken concrete is distracting. It's things that you notice later on that you're like, yeah, I probably could have done better. Just this simple step of just, if you're taking a photo, be bending down a little bit and then taking your image, keeping that back nice and straight. You won't really hurt the next day. However, you'll get something that may show itself as either more professional or just nicer in general. Or even get lower than that. You know, if you've got kids, or like, you know, my dog, for example, we just got a new puppy in my family about 2 weeks ago. The little guy is adorable, but it's really hard when I take a picture shooting down at him, he looks funny. So a lot of the times I lay on my belly and I sit there with my camera and I wait and he plays, and all of a sudden he'll walk across in a fun way and I'll get it. And it shoots up towards him and he looks adorable. You see this little pride in his chest, and it's fun. Same thing can be said for kids or for smaller people in general. If we can shoot a little lower than they are and we shoot up at them, the hierarchy scale tips in their favor. Now the viewer is lower and they're higher in a sense, which leads to just a nicer image. Now the other thing I would say too is that at least one of the girl's eyes are in the top thirds, but you also have really nice symmetry in the sense that almost all of these kids' eyes are in a nice continuous line. Having that type of fluidity in an image can really be appealing towards others to kind of keep their eyes drawn on your image. If you're taking pictures of flowers and all the tulips are all lined up, try to capture that really well in the camera. If you've taken pictures of birds and they're all lined up on a fence or a wire, try to get it where they're all perfectly straight. It just adds to the image. Now here's a more in-depth breakdown of the rule of thirds, and we'll see some images that will help with that. But you can see that you have a right, a center, a left, a top, a bottom, a center, and you have then intersecting points that then cross through. Now those crossing points are the rule of thirds. If you can get your image to line up somewhere within those red dots, then you're getting something that looks nice. And what I mean by that, when I say looks nice, really what we're trying to capture is that way back when scientists, photographers, all these people really developed or thought about what humans like to look at. And they followed eyes, they followed patterns. There's another rule too of the swirl. I forgot what that's called, but you see it in paintings all the time. This is a good example of just photography basics where if you can hit at certain points, it's meant to be more appealing to humans. We like this kind of stuff. I always use the caveman reference. It's like we're simple humans, simple Neanderthals, if you will. We like pretty things, shiny things. You got a surfer dude. Surfer dude is hitting the center point right here perfectly. Then his shadow, because of the harsh sun that's behind him, is also hitting the other line perfectly. A stimulating image. You can say too, why not cut out the extra and get rid of the fluff that's on there, so fill the frame a little bit more. The person who's taking the photo might have wanted that beautiful horizon line that cuts across with the people on the beach. It helps make the image look less fake or set up. It adds a little bit more symmetry to the image, but it also just looks fun. A bunch of beach photos too. I'm going to warn you right off the bat. Next beach photo. In this case though, rather than a harsh shadow coming down, little girl's shoulder, little girl's ankle, hitting perfectly on there as she looks outward dramatically on the beach, and you've got the horizon line hitting at that top third line really nicely. As overcast clouds come through, you can see some light spots on there, so the sun should be shining somewhere there too. Plus she has a shadow that's hidden right behind her as well, so sun should be hidden down there perfectly right there. But again, you're adding this dramaticism between the black and the white, the way that the rule of third is hitting her shoulders as she looks outward at the sea, just adds to the image, makes it maybe a little more dramatic or moody or fun, what have you. Now, another one, we talk about that eye line and just kind of how those lines were matched up for those kids in that one. This would be something similar, but instead we have mom and dad, brother and sister, or what I would assume to be the bunch. Where here you've got two buildings that are converging into a one-point perspective. So if you follow lines this way, the buildings' lines all kind of go in the same type of pattern, which is really fun. But then on top of that, and the only critique I have is that I would have moved mom and dad over slightly so they would have hit that perfectly. But you can see, top of the girl's shoulder, bottom where their hands are being held, I mean, basically, mom from about her belly button down to her ankle, perfectly in the rule of thirds. Moving the kids forward a little bit more so that way they get close in height to the parents, who are obviously going to be taller than their children, is a nice little piece too that you could add on from there as well if you're looking for more symmetry. But just a really nice way of taking a family portrait without taking that, traditional Christmas card picture or, the fireplace mantle picture. I don't even know if that even people do that anymore, but yeah. Just a fun little image that you can do. It's just something that adds to the appeal of your photography to make it, from as basic as just taking a picture of your everyday flower to adding a little more fluff onto it to draw it out, to be that photographer. This is a goofy one, but people always ask me about TV and stuff, so I think about it in the same way. TV reflects art, which reflects life. So in this case, you got The Office, if you've ever watched it. Jim from The Office. Again, if it was me though, slightly moved over, would be perfect. Eyebrows are in that top third, so I include that with the eyes, because the eyebrows are part of the eye kind of cavity. From there, he's hitting that line almost perfectly. You got 1 point there, 1 point there. Now, the question could be said, why not fill the frame in this case? However, if you watch the show, they interview these people during these types of scenes, and you can tell that he's in the conference room because you got the plant on the one side, the window over on the other. It just kind of looks as if though it fits. The last thing I mentioned too, lighting is a huge part of photography. Before digital cameras came out and you just had film cameras, if you had no light, you had no image. And that's why flashes were created, so that way even during the darkest of night times, you could take a picture. Sun on your back, or the sun in general, is your best friend, but it also could be your worst enemy. A lot of the times when we take pictures, we think that, just because there's recessed can lighting, for example, we're going to still have a good image. However, these lights are very on the more orange side or bright side of the Kelvin spectrum, or lumen spectrum, rather than being more of the cold, iridescent, or LEDs that we sometimes see nowadays. These are more warm bulbs, Edison bulbs, for example. So lighting affects our images based on its white balance, and that's something that why on our cameras we have what's called auto white balance. And unless you're experienced with light and everything else, which I'm not even myself, auto white balance, which is what your camera's already set to, just leave it at that. However, though, for those who want to experiment with that, or when you're just in general taking pictures, keeping the light on your back is a great tool, but opening yourself up to that light is something you should be willing to do. For example, this image on the very top here, you can see how dark the fish is, how dark our guy is who's holding the fish. You can see that the sunlight is coming on his back and hitting in the front, casting a shadow right in front of him, but also you can see the trail of light that's coming in. The fish is slimy, it's got scales, it adds reflection when you're holding it. So the fact that he's blocking it out leads to him having this dark overcast. He pops the hat up, tilts the head to the side a little bit, moves that fish over, and now you've got reflection coming off, but not only do you have reflection, but you can see the little red and green and yellow dots right by the fish underneath his shoulder there. That's the sun ray coming through. That would probably be a good example of someone not having a filter on their lens. That's a long story, but basically UV light can sometimes give weird rays in your photos that just kind of look funky. That's a perfect example of what that funkiness would be. However, though, everything else is really crisp and nice in the light, and you can see more detail. You can read his shirt. You can see the fish. You can see his face now. It's not dark. It's also not blocking his face out. So it's little things like that that if you can play with, mixed with those other tips and tricks, you can really bring out a lot of cool qualities on your image and just have fun with it a little bit more. So I think that would be really helpful and nice. Last thing too is use your timer, use your camera app. We talked about that mode drive button on there and how you can set a timer on your camera. That's kind of redundant nowadays because you can set a timer using your phone and using the app that can connect to your camera. If you go through your booklet, there's usually a code to scan, or it'll tell you what app to download if you've got Android or iPhone. And what's really cool about these apps is that, number one, a lot of them have a free editor in there where you can actually edit and change the photos and then use them to send out text or do whatever you like with it. I don't use the photo editor nearly at all. I use my editor on my computer. However, though, if I want, let's say I'm on vacation and my grandmother's like, oh, I'd love to see, I was in London in October. Maybe she's like, oh, I want to see what what you're doing. I want to see pictures. I can just take 10 images from my camera and then text them over to her with no problem because I can send them to my phone. Recently, I had to do new headshots for my website and for an updated charity page that I'm a part of, and they required what I look like right now. So I used my tripod, set my camera up on there, and I didn't have anybody else with me that could take the photos. I don't need anybody else. I can just use my phone. The phone had a timer app on there and actually had the ability for me to see the image first and then click the picture. So I set the timer, sat in front of it, captured. Something like that that's simple enough that you can use without having to kind of dive into your camera buttons and features too much. It's the one thing I will say is people get overwhelmed by all the buttons on the camera. They think they need to know everything right away. The first thing you got to learn is just taking a good picture. Once you learn that, the other stuff opens itself up to you, and then as you keep going, you figure out what you need to know and don't need to know, and you don't overwhelm or overload yourself all at once. So use the timer, use the app on the phone. They're really helpful. They've even got maybe some tips and tricks on there. Certain ones do. I think Canon's really big on that. I don't know about Sony or Nikon. I know Canon's huge on that. But they're available and they're completely free because you bought the cameras. They're completely free in general, but now that you have the camera, you can use the app. This one's a little silly, but content creation's been coming up more and more, and we get more people who are coming in for it. Content creators are people who are, not only just doing YouTube and social media, but people who are building a brand. Maybe you've got a new jewelry business that you're starting, or maybe you're making dresses or sewing clothes, or maybe you knit or crochet, or maybe you have a beautiful garden that you want to show off. Having certain materials and stuff available to you is extremely important, rather than hiring somebody to come out and take these photos and they charge hundreds or thousands of dollars per shoot. So what I tell people all the time is if you're doing video quality matters, but make sure it matters towards what you're doing. Have the proper lenses, the lengths, the focal, everything else that you need. Proper body of the camera, and then the settings. So if you're getting into this stuff, it's important to go online, research exactly what it is about your camera that you bought it for, but then two, what settings should be turned on and off to make your life easier. Tripods, gimbals, we don't talk about that until the advanced camera class, so I'm not going to spare you details on that. But tripods and gimbals offer stabilization. They offer you the kind of basis of planting yourself to get the image properly without needing to be shaky or without having to force yourself to take that image. It is awkward. Lighting is important too, whether that's natural lighting, studio lighting, on-camera lighting. All of that's available to you. Natural lighting is the easiest way to get into things because you don't need much, just need a sunny day. Mics are important too. If you're taking video, your camera has a microphone built into it, but I tell people all the time, it's like your TV speakers. They're garbage. They're not meant to be good. The idea behind it is that it's there to take your image or your video. If you want something more, you invest in all the other accessories to do it. Just like you'll buy a sound bar for your TV because your picture looks so good. It's the kind of give and pull. Shotgun mics are available. That goes on top of the camera. On-camera microphones, so something not a shotgun mic, but similar to one you can find. And then wireless mics are huge. I like wireless mics. I have a set at home that I use all the time. But for example, 2 Thursdays from now, because the camera class is going to be a little weird this month, I'll be doing an event for the Chicago Canine Rescue where I'll need to have a shotgun mic on my camera set up in my rig when I'm taking videos and pictures of people, so that way I can get sound and record without having them wearing those silly little mics. Easy ways to get into content creation if that's a route you want to go. They make these kits that you can buy for your camera. Again, a real simple, cheap, easy way to get into it without buying every little piece individually and finding out that you don't like this or you love this or X, Y, Z. All right, accessories. I don't push accessories on anybody. I figure most people, especially in the camera world, you will get what you need as you discover you need it, and using or doing photography just exploits so much, because as soon as you start using it, you realize, oh dang, I really need that, or oh, I question about that. My top 5, I think, are the ones you need most. Buy yourself a bag. You spent all this money on your camera. Protect your gear. Make sure it's safe. You don't want to drop or lose anything. Even if it's a small point-and-shoot camera, buy a small point-and-shoot bag for it. If you're going to keep it in your bag, your purse, whatever it is, it's better to keep it in a nice protected material case than keeping it all willy-nilly. Extra batteries, extra memory cards, in my opinion, are a must. If you're buying a camera, you should have an extra battery, you should have an extra memory card. Again, if you don't charge your camera before you go somewhere, it'd be a shame if you get there, turn the camera on, it's dead. Have the extra battery, you won't regret that. Extra memory card, same boat. Copper contact strips on the back of that card. If they get damaged, waterlogged, scratched, there's a chance they might not work anymore. So have a second one. A lens cleaning kit. So one of the charity organizations I work for is the Chicago Polar Bear Club. I get in the, we take pictures of people who jump in the lake during January to raise money for different charities, Special Olympics, etc. I take pictures inside the water. I wear a suit that I keep on and I get in the water, and the water is like 20 degrees, it's freezing. The air temperature is -3, it's very cold. However, when people jump into the lake, they splash water up at me, it hits the lens, and it's all over. If I don't clean that lens immediately, it's gonna freeze over, and then I have bigger problems because now all my pictures look like trash. So I keep a lens cleaning cloth in my kind of like upper breast pocket while I'm doing this, so I can constantly take it off, wipe the lens, and put it back in. Never use your shirt, never use your sweater, don't breathe into the lens, none of that stuff works. At the end of the day, all that stuff adds to micro scratches on the lens. The biggest expression in the camera industry is marry your glass, date your body. The glass is where the money is. The optics is where the best part of your camera is. Eventually your camera will become outdated. It takes about 10 years for that to happen. And if it's continuous use, you're using it all the time, I give you 5 years. However, if you can take good care of your lenses and take good care of your camera in general in that portion of it, you're going to extend the longevity of it for a long, long time. So don't use your sweater. And a strap. I think that anybody who's using a camera should have a neck strap, a hand strap, just something. I'll be honest with you, when I go on vacation or I go somewhere where I'm traveling with my camera, unless I'm doing a shoot, you know, I need to have extra gear with me, I never bring a bag. Camera lives on my neck the whole time. I'm on the airplane, I'm doing anything, camera's right on my neck. Every time I go on an airplane, I end up taking pictures of the, airport all the time. I like taking pictures of the airport, I think it's goofy. A tripod's good if you need it. If you're shaky, use it. It's definitely worth it. It can be bulky. There's monopods too, even little stick pods. There's a bunch of different accessories. An external hard drive, if you don't like using cloud-based solutions, it's a great way to store everything. It's also nice because you don't have to junk up your computer with thousands of photos. Last time I looked on my hard drive, I think I was close to 500,000 images. Again, but that's spanned over about 15 years of me taking photos, so it's a lot of images. Filters. If you have a lens that can use filters on there, I definitely would recommend looking into them. They make polarizing filters that help with glare, like with water or with metal or with things with really intense shine. UV filters help cut through the sun's ultraviolet rays that can sometimes give you wonky looks. Additional lenses are great if you know what you're looking for. If you don't spend all this money on a lens when you don't know what its purpose is for. It's a big thing, I would say. And classes and workshops. My class is great, but if there's a club by your house that likes taking photos, maybe try joining them. There's a woman who used to come to my classes all the time. She is a part of a club at the Chicago Botanic Gardens, where literally they meet once every 2 weeks in the summertime. They show off all their photos. They have a competition, and there's like a weekly bulletin that goes and gets sent out. Whoever wins that competition, that's the photo that gets put on the bulletin. And so they're really prideful in their work. They have a lot of fun with it. There's a group that gets to shoot out of O'Hare Airport where they have special clearance to go on the tarmac. They've got a little section where they can take pictures. They were just on WGN like a year ago. It was really cool. I met one of the people that are part of that came in to buy a lens. Just really good people. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do to get better at it, but being in the company of photographers can really sometimes elevate your game a little bit and just give you more ideas and just inspire you to take more pictures, which is the key of using a camera. This is my favorite quote, and I will always use it. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. Just because you got a deal on it doesn't mean it's good. Research what you want. Make sure you're investing in the parts of the camera that you care about. Don't just buy it to buy it. If you need something, make sure you're getting the best for you. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to spend $1 billion on a product, but that does mean that if you're buying something like a lens, the reason that more expensive lenses exist versus the cheaper lenses, because the more expensive lenses have the better quality, the better glass, the better coatings on the glass for weatherproofing and sealing. Those things are all important factors, but they also might not be important for enough for you to justify that purchase. So keep that in mind when you're looking to invest in these products, because photography is an expensive hobby. And that is all I have for you guys today. Like I said, this one always goes about an hour and a half. This is one of the longest classes I have. Intermediate is a little long too, because we now dive into the controls of the camera. Things like aperture, f-stop, shutter speed. Those are an ISO. Those are the major things that make up what we call the exposure triangle, which it really helps explain how the camera is functioning on a manual setting. Once we get through that, we talk about lenses, functionality of lenses, focal length, and then distortion on lenses, which is a big portion of that too. And that'll be next Thursday. I did say there's a little bit of a hiccup, so for anybody watching at home, and then for you guys to know too, on the 16th of May, I will be having that event at the Chicago Canine Rescue, so I will not be available for the class. So basically this month, it is the 2nd of this month, which is today. Next week will be intermediate cameras. Then the 23rd is going to be advanced, and then the 30th is going to be the beyond the traditional camera. So the 16th of this month, there will be no class, but luckily there are 5 Thursdays to this month, so we will still have all 4 on Thursdays. Other than that, that is all the information I have for you. I got a couple more minutes in here, so by all means, anybody online, go ahead and ask any questions if you have any. But for my people in front of me, do you guys have any questions for me while you're here?
I got locked. No.
Well, even if you think of something later, take a picture.
Well, you know what's funny is I did pretty good considering.
Yeah.
When you look at these pictures. Now, how do I know I'm in automatic? I mean.
So, with these cameras, let me take a look here.
And that screen goes. I mean, I have to work on focusing.
Yeah. So when you're using this guy, that half click there, you'll see when I do a half click on this, I push down. You'll hear that little click, right? But now when you see when I squeeze, that little squares pop up.
Oh.
That's the focus area. That's where the camera's choosing to focus. So depending on what the camera reads as the closest portion is what it's going to do. Now if I want to, I can then click on the screen and that will give me a focus too. If I don't like that, which a lot of people don't, there's a little X button right there. You can press that and it'll cancel the tracking feature on there. Again, little things to learn with the camera that they make a big difference. Now, in order for us to make sure we're on the correct mode.
There's that format thing, right?
Yeah, that's for file format. That's one thing. However,
oh, go ahead. No,
I
didn't want to take them away from you either.
If we go to the menu on here, let's see, this is where we probably can find.
You don't think I'm going to do this? What are you in?
So I'm using this. This little dial pad is your way of skipping through everything.
Okay.
So on the little yellow toolbox where it says setup menu, on page 4, there's format. I'm going to press OK on that. Then you can format the card. I'm not going to do that because if I do, it'll delete everything you just took today. So go through everything, download it onto the computer. When you're ready, just go to that 4th menu page or 5th menu page. So you scroll through. When you get there, just press down, and then you can actually just start turning the wheel instead. And actually, no, you can't. Never mind. You gotta press the buttons to go through them. Once you do, then you can just move the wheel to go down. But it's on page 4 of the little setup.
And that's how I'll delete it once I get on my computer.
Exactly. That's the easiest way to delete it. It'll delete everything on the card.
Okay. Now, stupid question. Did I set up date time?
Let's see.
I tried, but I
Actually, the easiest way to check that is if we do the display button.
Where's the display?
It's up there where it says display.
Okay.
DISP. You're just going to click upwards, and that's going to do the display features on there. However, we don't have to worry. Actually, it doesn't show through that. Let's press this button. Yep, April 25th at 8:55 p.m. You took this one. So yeah, date and time is set up on the camera.
So this should have gone up higher.
Mm-hmm.
When I took the picture, my camera should have gone higher.
You took it this side, this way.
What?
You took it vertically.
I did?
Mm-hmm. So when the, at least on this one you did. Now looking through, you have a few more.
Okay.
So a little blurry.
Yeah, yeah.
Biggest thing to do.
Well, that was okay.
That was probably the best one. That one you just have to focus better.
You have a lot of wasted space. I doesn't do that.
Yeah, it doesn't do that, but it does it this way instead.
Yeah,
so
no,
use that
that's
little
good to
zoom
know
in.
too.
Yeah, that's how I look to see how crisp images are. So I'll scroll through to see, and then I'll start zooming in a little bit more, and then I'm like, okay, so that's blurry on that side, so it's not the most crisp image.
Okay. I was just playing with it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's good. It's a good starter. But yeah, all we're doing, and then we can kind of go through and see all the different images and skip through. Like these are gorgeous. That's
Well,
awesome.
thank you.
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah, absolutely. They look crisp. They look really nice. The sun looks good. The sky's got cool color. Like those are the little things that you're looking at when you're taking pictures. Like overall, that one's really nice. It's a little bit blurry in the background still, but your foreground looks really nice. It's the little things that you're looking for as you take your photos. That looks really nice, just the way the waves are hitting on the water. It's small little details like that that go along.
Okay, okay.
But the easiest way to check your mode is that little mode button up there. Press on mode. And from there, we can then
Oh
zoom
my God,
through.
now where are you at here?
So that's just a different. That's the menu that we were at. So when we talk about all these, auto, video.
Okay, everything's on auto.
Yep. So that's what that green switch is. So then just hit OK, and then now you're still
I'm
on
not
auto.
touching any of that shit.
Exactly. No, you don't have to yet.
No. Nope.
You're fine. It's definitely worth it when you get that. When you have the time to play with it.
Oh no, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta figure out seeing. I might need stronger glasses to capture those owls.
Start with learning it, and it'll go a long way. As you're shooting, you can zoom in, get really nice image there, focus in on what you're trying to take pictures of, and you're good. Once you then start learning the other modes, you can then go through this. There's this kind of...
No, go back. I don't even want to look at that.
Those are those extra buttons, though. Those ones of like setting
Yeah.
shutter and everything else to learn what you're doing on there. The one thing you are on right now, though, is macro.
Huh?
Have them fix it.
Yeah, no, fix it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep playing with it. I'll probably be back at the beginner's class.
We're having next month in June.
Okay. Now, I need a bag.
I don't know if I have any. So the problem with those guys is that because they don't make a lot of these small cameras anymore, I don't really got small bags. You can always go down, check with my guys in Small Electronics. That's what's selling those bags. Ask anybody by the fish tank. They'll have all that extra stuff for you. And they'll walk you through and find something for you. Same thing if you ever want to get an extra battery or extra memory cards. They're the guys to talk to with that.
And I gotta, okay, I'll go talk to them.
Any questions for me?
Not right now. We're gonna go and play around with it.
Exactly.
You're good.
Well, we'll see.
Let me open the door for y'all. Again, anything comes up, phone number, emails on there. My business card's also down there too, so you can just grab one of those if it's easier. And then anytime you got questions on it, call, email me. I always tell customers too, if you take an image and you're like, why does it look this way? Email me that picture, give me a synopsis of what's going on, and then I can figure it out from there.
Okay.
Do you have a recommendation of a tripod?
I like the ProMaster ones that we have. Depends how fancy you want to get with it. They've got
Yeah.
tons of different brands. Given your camera, your camera, you probably don't want to even think about a tripod right now.
Oh, no.
But for your tripod, I would say you don't need anything that's super heavy duty. Typically, the most expensive ones, it's because they can get really tall and they can hold like 17, 18 pounds. So you don't have to get anything quite like that.
Or,
Get one that works for your price range, but ProMaster's a nice one. They're pretty flexible in price. So.
I'm looking for a smaller that fits under it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'll find there'll be something down there. Yeah. Perfect.
Oh, wow.
My electronics break in my purse, so they will no longer ever be in my purse.
Understandable.
Well, I have this little bag, that's all I had, and I was at Starved Rock, and it was so muddy. These people were walking around with big cameras, and one lady went down, I was like,
I'm that type of person. I usually keep a big camera on my neck. I was in Utah one time with it, and literally the thing was like that big, and I'm going through water that's like up to here.
Were you at the Narrows?
The Narrows, yeah, literally. So the camera was above my head as I'm trudging through.
You better best be damn sure if I'm falling, the camera is going nowhere near the water.
Well, I didn't pull it out. My husband goes, you didn't play with it. I go, the only time I pulled it out was when I saw the pelicans and the owls. And then I kind of went a little wacko. But I didn't see anything because I couldn't see.
Understandable.
'Cause, you know, they're so well hidden.
That's right.
They're hidden, but they're not. All right.
Thanks for coming in, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching online. think I'm done for the day. Nobody has any questions that I can see there. But if you think of anything in the future, my full email and name are on that slide there. Take a picture, take a screenshot, or you can watch the video later. But thanks everybody. Have a great night, and then I will see everybody next week for